Hey guys, SGT here, and I've been meaning for quite some time to get this person on the line. He's an executive in the firearms industry for a mid-sized company, a part-time police officer, and he works for two law enforcement training companies. And with the tragic events in Aurora, Colorado opening the door for gun ban advocates, I wanted to get him on. Mark, welcome.
Thanks for having me, Sean.
Thanks for joining us. I mean, obviously with the events in Aurora, false flag or not, the door is now open for the advocates of the UN gun ban treaty that it looks like Obama is going to sign here towards the end of the month. The door is now wide open, and the excuse to ban our guns has never been stronger. Mark, I wanted to get you on to talk about that treaty, but before we go there, tell me about your thoughts as a law enforcement officer and somebody with experience in the field. What's your take on what happened in Aurora?
Well, the first thing I want to say is what a political plum for President Obama. It couldn't have happened at a better time for him to push his agenda. And like you said, all conspiracy theories aside, it just leaves you wondering how convenient this was for him. The other thing I want to say about Obama is that as a police officer, I can tell you that in the city of Chicago, Obama's own town, in the last 3.5 years of his term, there have been numerous incidents on weekends where at least this many people have been murdered and 3 to 4 to 5 times as many people wounded. And he's never shed any tears or offered any hugs for the people in his own town, which, by the way, has some of the strongest gun control laws in the nation. So I think it's a little hypocritical of him to drop everything that he's doing in his campaign and run out there for the perfect photo op to make the best use of this crisis that he could.
Yeah, you make an excellent point, and I'm glad you brought that up because we have Rahm Emanuel, the former right-hand man to President Obama, in Chicago, and we know that the bloodshed in Chicago has never been higher. There's never been a greater loss of life due to weapons in the arms of bad guys than there are in Chicago, Illinois this summer. And the point there is that even with gun bans or gun restrictions, the only people that end up having the weapons then are the bad guys, right, Mark?
I agree. And the thing is, if you listen to anyone that's a credible source in law enforcement, they will tell you that this type of offender, this type of violent offender, the lone gunman, is the most difficult person to deal with because they commit acts of random violence. And I think that, we may be preaching to the choir a little bit here, but guys like me and yourself get tired of saying, well, if there were no guns, this would happen. It's tough to deal with people when they have a knee-jerk and emotional response to a tragedy like this. The truth is that restricting the rights and ownership privileges of law-abiding citizens doesn't do anything to help make anyone safer. And the truth is, Sean, is that if you look at the statistics, why should you as a society or as a government punish the masses of law-abiding citizens and honest people out there for the criminal misdeeds and insanity of a tiny, tiny small population, a percentage of the American population? The truth is that having guns is dangerous. Accident happens. If you're going to have firearms, especially in abundance like we do in this country, it can be dangerous. But the only thing that's more dangerous than that is not having them at all, because then you would have no deterrent. You would have no ability for the people to protect themselves. You would have no restraint from government that is exercising itself in a tyrannical way. You would have no way for the people to do anything like that. So it's unfortunate, but this ends up being one of the things that is the price of our freedom.
Mark, let's talk about this UN gun ban treaty that apparently might be signed by Obama on the 27th of July, right around the corner here. What do you make of it? Do you think he's actually going to sign it? And if he does sign it, what are we to do as a free people who want to remain free?
Okay. Well, the thing is, Sean, I think that's the best question. And I think that you raise a very valid point, which is rather than gun owners of America worrying about what are we going to do if they pass this or that law, I think what we really need to be concerned with at this point is what is our response as a group of honest American citizens to a response that would limit our constitutional freedoms. Okay, they can pass any law that they want. Until they try and enforce that on the people, if we let it happen, it's our fault, because there has got to be some type of backlash by the American people if they do this. Now, if you're asking me whether I think that they will pass this law or sign this treaty, they could sign anything they want, but what happens to it after it gets signed, I'm not really sure. The threat of this treaty looming has been going on for a long time, and I'm not really concerned about it that much. I'm really more concerned about other things that the anti-gun crowd does to attack our Second Amendment freedoms by masquerading as environmental laws or public safety issues. There's a lot of backdoor attacks that they're guilty of that I think are really more sinister and harder to spot and harder to fight than this UN treaty. The other issue is that it's an election year, and if this guy or Hillary did sign this treaty, you're in a period of where we're 90 days out from Election Day, approximately. And I think it would be, very damaging to himself if he did something like that, because there are quite a bit of people that are on the line of what they're going to do as far as a vote. And I think that would, throw some people to the point where I'm not voting for this guy. When you get into an issue of if they pass this stuff, okay, until they are saying we need some type of registration, okay, and they're asking you for a list of everything you have, to me, that's when it's time to worry. And that's when the gun owners of this country have to make a choice, because at that point, they will be criminalizing themselves if they choose not to follow with the registration. And if you don't register your guns when they tell you to, from that point on, you're taking a huge risk by taking them outside your home to go to the range and practice and do all kinds of stuff. And, if you're popping away at a range and the state police come up to you and say, hey, is that registered? And you say no, you're walking away in cuffs. So we may get to a point here where people are going to have a serious call to action, and they're going to have to make some serious choices about where they stand and how they're going to have to stick their neck out going forward.
Yeah, that's an interesting point, because, as you know, my opinion is that in a system that has turned its back on the people, a fascist system like this one, as Gerald Celente says, there is no justice left. The laws are for just us. And, we see the banksters stealing and looting and robbing with no recourse, with nobody going to prison. And basically all we have left, Mark, is our First Amendment rights to speak out against the fascist dictatorship and this fascist system, and our Second Amendment rights to keep and bear our arms. Now, in this treaty, the only ones with guns would be the UN, quote, peacekeepers. Can you imagine anything more Orwellian than this? So they can, quote, enforce the peace. They're going to enforce the peace, Mark. Now, I know what you're saying. This is a little bit of a slippery slope into a worst-case scenario as we start to play these scenarios out. UN, blue hats, other foreign troops in this country trying to disarm the people. My point is, and I want to know what your opinion is based on what we should do if they sign it, the minute the government starts to come for the guns in this country, that's when the shooting war starts. And that's not anything we want, is it?
I agree, but I think that there are some things that would happen if they did sign the treaty. And I think that, one of the first things we would have to look at if they did sign the treaty is what the language was. And if something like that did happen, there would be people with legal expertise that would look at that to decipher it. Because, Sean, you know as well as I do, when they sign something like that or write language like that, that stuff is intentionally vague, and there's a lot of shrouded meanings to how that stuff can be interpreted. For example, you look at stuff like the NDAA and the Patriot Act. It doesn't say that they can go after anybody for being a terrorist for whatever reason, but that's what it is. The other thing is this too, Sean, and I never hear anybody mention this, and I work in this system, so I know how it is. I'm not giving my opinion on this. This is a fact. The military-industrial complex in this country, the civilian firearms industry, the commercial firearms industry, both of those are extremely powerful lobbies in this country, okay? And if it ever came down to it where this treaty would either hinder them from doing business domestically and abroad, I think that they would have something to say about that. These companies, you're talking about hundreds of billions of dollars at stake. And these companies are not going to just dry up and blow away and close their doors and say, okay, well, you guys passed the treaty, so we're done here. There's going to be a lot of jobs at stake if something like that happens. And then, the other thing is, if this country, in the powers that we're talking about, the agendas that we're talking about, if they want to continue to wage war and do all the stuff that they've been doing for the last 20 years, we talked about Gerald Celente, bullets, bombs, and banks. I'm a big follower of Celente. That weaponry has to come from somewhere. They're not going to, take Chinese weaponry or Russian weaponry. The best hardware in the world comes from this country.
Let me just jump in and say that, there'll still be guns made. They just won't be in the hands of the people. And, when we talk about the dictatorship, a lot of people are talking about this Obama dictatorship. His Social Security number is a mystery. His history is a mystery. The first executive order he signed upon becoming president was to seal all of his records. The guy is an enigma. He's a mystery. He's a little dictator. He said recently that if you own a small business and you're successful, you didn't start that business, you had help, right? This is a slippery slope into a fascist, socialist, Marxist dictatorship, and for him to sign this treaty, which, by the way, according to Fox News in an article I posted on Thursday, says that, quote, Russia, China, France, with its new socialist government, Britain, and the Obama administration are writing the treaty behind closed doors, Mark. So when you talk about this secret language that's in these bills, the generalities in which these bills are written, or the volume in which these bills are written. When you talk about the secrecy of these bills, it's just like the Obama health care plan. When Pelosi said we need to pass it so that we can see what's in it. I mean, that's how far gone we are. That's how far, this is the Twilight Zone level stuff. It's absolutely nuts that we even need to have this conversation. So
that's my point, Sean. My point is that if we let it come to the point where we're dealing with confiscation issues, and we wait to the point where that is happening in any town USA, we have failed ourselves miserably, as Americans. And I think that is what I was trying to convey before, which is, why wait? Why let it wait to come to that? Why sit around and wait to say, well, what if they do sign this, or what if they do sign that? Instead of worrying about that, what we should be doing is formulating a response as Americans. People need to get organized in a way that they've never done before, so we can voice our opinions about this before it comes to the point where the shooting starts. In other words, if you're going to stick your neck out over this issue, why not do it now when you can do it verbally, when you can do it politically? Because if you have to wait until you're worried about, hey, it's time to start loading magazines over here, you may end up a loser no matter what happens. You're not good to your family. You're not good to anybody, the people who care about you. If you're not around anymore, it may not matter anyway. What I think is really necessary at this point is for us, we the people, to communicate to our government what we will and will not tolerate in regards to the violation of our Second Amendment rights.
I'm going to just jump in because I agree with everything you're saying, except I think that ship has sailed, Mark, because as it relates to the banker bailouts and TARP in 2008, 90% of the people contacting Congress didn't want Congress to give those bailouts. Congress did it anyway. We no longer have a government by and for the people. The government no longer cares what you or I or any of our friends think. That's the problem. So for him to go and sign this treaty is a slippery slope into absolute tyranny under the guise of the UN mandate, under the guise of international law. That's the problem. There's nothing that you or the NRA or any of us can do at this point, because by the time this interview airs, he probably will have already signed it.
From what I understand, the soonest that they're looking at signing anything like this is July 27th, which coincidentally is the same day that the Summer Olympics begin, which would be kind of a good smokescreen. We know how they like to do all that stuff where, hey, it's New Year's Eve and we're going to sign the NDAA, or, we're going to sign something at 5 o'clock on a Friday after the newspapers have printed for the day and stuff like that. So that wouldn't surprise me. But I think that if he does sign something like this, or our government looks at backing a treaty like this, I think that needs to be a call to action for people.
Thanks for watching Part 1. Don't miss Part 2. Thanks for watching.